The Grizal were no strangers to conquest. They had marched galaxy by galaxy, through thousands of worlds, eradicating or subjugating any species that dared resist. For as long as the Grizal Empire had existed, its fleets had been known as the Hammer of Destiny, precise, swift, and unrelenting. When the Grizal conquered, they left nothing to chance. Their approach to conquest was always the same. When a new star system appeared on their charts, they studied it, identifying its population, technology, and resources. They had perfected the art of psychological warfare. They would send a small contingent, show an overwhelming display of force, and offer the terrified species a choice: surrender or be erased. But as they neared Earth, there was an unusual reaction. No mass mobilization of ships, no panicked pleas for negotiation, only a single signal. Sol System response. The translated transmission read: To the Grizal High Command, this is Earth. You are trespassing in human space. Further incursions will not be tolerated. The Grizal War Chief, an imposing figure with emerald green skin and eyes like polished onyx, stared at the display in amusement. He was known among his people as War Chief Threll, the Fist of Grizal, the unbending wall that broke empires. And now, here was a primitive species addressing him with a casual defiance. Send the first wave, Threll commanded, his voice resonating through the command deck. Let them see our strength. The first wave was small, as it always was, 2 battalions of Grizal cruisers, positioned just beyond Pluto. But to Threll's surprise, the humans did not respond as expected. Instead, a single blip appeared on the Grizal sensors. What is that? Asked his lieutenant, a younger Grizal warrior with dark scales that shimmered under the command room's lights. One ship, Threll replied, his voice dripping with scorn. Just one ship. Captain Priya Rao stood on the bridge of the UNS Indomitable, her posture straight, her face a calm mask of focus. Around her, the bridge crew worked with steady efficiency, their faces calm despite the high-stakes mission they faced. The UNS Indomitable was a unique vessel, the product of nearly 2 decades of research and development by the United Nations Space Command. While humanity lacked the fleet size and resources of other species in the galaxy, they had poured all their efforts into creating one perfect ship, capable of defending Earth with unmatched resilience and versatility. Where Grizal ships were designed for brute force, the Indomitable was engineered to outthink, outmaneuver, and outlast. Captain, Grizal vessels are scanning us, reported the tactical officer, her fingers dancing over the console as she monitored the enemy fleet's movement. They're focusing on our shields and hull structure. I don't think they know what to make of us. Captain Rao nodded, her eyes narrowing as she studied the readouts on her own display. They're expecting a fleet. They want us to panic, to respond with all our forces at once. But instead, we'll show them the Indomitable. This was humanity's gamble. Over the last 2 decades, Earth scientists and strategists had foreseen that the Grizal would eventually turn their gaze towards Sol. Instead of constructing a massive fleet, they had pooled every resource into the Indomitable, a one-of-a-kind vessel built with the cutting edge of Earth's technology. Adaptive shielding, drone-based countermeasures, advanced ECM, electronic countermeasure, suites, and a hull reinforced with the toughest alloys known to man. Captain Rao addressed her communications officer. Prepare the message. Yes, Captain. The officer nodded and began transmitting their message to the Grizal. This is Captain Priya Rao of the UNS Indomitable. Grizal, you have been warned. Cease your incursion into human space, or we will be forced to respond. The Grizal War Chief's laughter echoed across the command deck as he heard the transmission. They send a single ship and expect us to retreat? Pathetic, he sneered, waving his hand toward his subordinate. Send a wing of fighters. Teach them a lesson. For Grizal fighters detached from the cruiser's side, sleek and deadly, racing towards the Indomitable. Grizal fighters were built for speed and power. They carried plasma torpedoes, hull-penetrating missiles, and heavy particle cannons. Inside the Indomitable, Captain Rao observed their approach. Prepare countermeasures, she ordered, her voice steady. Yes, Captain, responded the weapons officer, who activated the Indomitable's drone array. A dozen small drones detached from the hull and dispersed, their movements calculated and synchronized to draw the Grizal fighters into a web. As the fighters closed in, the drones released bursts of electromagnetic interference, scrambling the Grizal targeting systems. The Grizal pilots struggled to regain control, but the drones were relentless, redirecting and disorienting them. Within moments, the fighters were caught in a crossfire, struck by their own allies' fire or caught in a detonation of their own munitions. One by one, the Grizal fighters were neutralized. The Indomitable hadn't fired a single shot. On board the Grizal flagship, War Chief Threll's jaw clenched in disbelief. They disabled our fighters without direct engagement? One of his subordinates muttered, "They've used some form of electronic warfare. It disrupted our fighters' guidance systems." Threll's expression darkened. "Enough of this. Send the main assault wing. We will crush this primitive ship and move on to Earth." Part 4. The Indomitable strikes. The Grizal cruisers advanced, their weaponry primed and shields at maximum. The Indomitable's sensors lit up as multiple targeting locks were established. "Captain, incoming fire," shouted the tactical officer. 3 plasma torpedoes, 15 particle beams. "Activate adaptive shielding," Captain Rao commanded. The Indomitable's adaptive shields flared to life, adjusting frequencies to match the incoming plasma torpedoes. Instead of exploding against the ship's hull, the torpedoes were absorbed and dispersed across the shield matrix, minimizing the impact. Particle beams struck next, and the shields reconfigured again, channeling the energy away from critical areas. "We can't hold this indefinitely," the shield officer warned. "Our power reserves will be depleted if we keep absorbing this much energy." Captain Rao nodded, her mind racing through their options. Launch a gravimetric pulse. Disrupt their formations. The Indomitable released a gravimetric pulse, a burst of gravitational interference that rippled through the Grizal formation. The tightly organized Grizal cruisers were thrown off course, forced to recalibrate their positions and defensive strategies. "Now," Rao ordered, "deploy the EMP rounds." 2 projectiles launched from the Indomitable, each one designed to deliver an electromagnetic pulse upon detonation. The rounds struck their targets, sending waves of disruption through the Grizal fleet. Several ships went dark, their systems fried. Inside the Grizal flagship, chaos erupted. Alarms blared, and crew members scrambled to restore functionality to the disrupted systems. "They're crippling us," Threll bellowed. "How is this possible?" The humans were using a level of sophistication the Grizal had never encountered. Instead of raw firepower, they were using tactics that exploited every weakness in the Grizal arsenal. "Send out our heavy cruisers," Threll commanded, his fury barely contained. "We will overwhelm them through sheer numbers." Part 5. The Standoff. As more Grizal cruisers poured into the battle, the Indomitable shifted to a defensive stance, using its remaining drones and decoy systems to draw the enemy fire away from its critical points. For every Grizal cruiser that advanced, the Indomitable would evade, redirecting their fire toward empty space or using their own weapons against them. But as the Grizal numbers grew, the Indomitable's options dwindled. Captain Rao knew they couldn't hold out much longer. "Captain, we have incoming communication from the Grizal flagship," her communications officer announced. "Open the channel," she replied. War Chief Threll's voice crackled through the speakers, his tone laced with anger and frustration. "Human, you have shown surprising resilience. But this ends now. I will not tolerate this resistance any longer. Surrender your ship, and I will spare your world." Captain Rao's expression remained calm. "War Chief Threll, I give you the same option. Retreat from human space or face the consequences." Threll's laughter was mocking and harsh. "You are one ship, Captain. I command a fleet." She smiled slightly. "True, but we are humans. We only need one." As the transmission ended, Captain Rao turned to her tactical officer. "Prepare the Nova Wave." The Indomitable had a final defense mechanism, a weapon created specifically for scenarios where conventional engagement was impossible. The Nova Wave was an experimental device that would create an energy surge, incapacitating any ship within its radius. But it was a last resort. It would leave the Indomitable defenseless until its systems could reboot. The officer looked hesitant, but nodded. "Nova Wave ready, Captain." "On my mark," Rao said, her gaze fixed on the Grizal ships encircling them. The Grizal fleet closed in, preparing for the final blow. Threll was smiling, relishing his victory. "Mark," Captain Rao ordered. The Indomitable unleashed the Nova Wave. A blinding burst of energy exploded outward, engulfing the Grizal fleet. Systems shorted, engines sputtered, and weapons powered down. For a few heartbeats, everything in the Sol system was silent. When the surge dissipated, the Indomitable drifted, its systems offline, as the Grizal ships began to reorient. But the Grizal's flagship was critically damaged, its engines and weapons fried beyond repair. A new transmission came through from Captain Rao, her voice calm but commanding. "Grizal, you have one chance. Withdraw from our space, or we will ensure you do not leave at all." War Chief Threll's pride was shattered. He had never suffered such humiliation, and yet he could not deny the reality of his situation. With a snarl, he gave the order to retreat. The Grisal ships limped away, defeated not by overwhelming numbers, but by a single ship, crafted with every ounce of human ingenuity and determination. As the last of the Grisal fleet disappeared into deep space, Captain Rao leaned back, allowing herself a small smile. The Sol system was safe once more, and Earth would remain free, its defenders fierce, its spirit unbreakable, and its resolve forged in the knowledge that when humanity stood together, they needed only one ship.